Tonight, I'm sharing 4 terrifying things people found in their basements. The first story comes from a man who discovered a hidden door beneath his staircase, and what waited behind it explains why he never set foot down there again. If chilling horror like this unsettles you, hit subscribe and ring the bell. I post new stories every single day. This account comes from Daniel, a 33-year-old graphic designer who bought his first house just outside Pittsburgh. The place was a century-old brick home, the kind with drafty windows, narrow hallways, and a basement that always smelled faintly of damp concrete. Daniel wasn't superstitious. He liked the quirks of old houses, the uneven floors, the squeaky doors. But from the first week, he couldn't shake the feeling that the basement was different. It wasn't just the smell, it was the quiet. Even when the washer ran, the silence seemed to press in, thick and heavy, like the sound didn't carry right. Still, he used the space for storage, stacking boxes of books and holiday decorations along the walls. The basement stairs creaked under his weight every time, and he always left the light on longer than necessary, just to give himself a head start back up. One weekend, Daniel decided to build shelving to organize the clutter. That's when he noticed something odd about the staircase itself. The wooden steps were built into a frame, boxed in on both sides, with one wall paneled in rough boards, but one section looked off. The wood grain ran differently, as if a panel had been replaced. And near the bottom, there was a faint outline, rectangular, like a door. Daniel crouched down, running his fingers along the seam. The wood flexed slightly, hollow. At first he laughed. "Great, my house has a secret door," he muttered. He figured it was some kind of old coal chute or storage space, but his stomach tightened as curiosity dug in. He fetched a screwdriver and pried at the seam. The wood groaned, nails squealing, and finally swung inward with a puff of stale, dusty air. Behind it, darkness. Daniel aimed his flashlight inside. The beam caught the edges of a narrow, hidden room beneath the stairs. Unfinished stone walls, dirt floor, just big enough for someone to crouch in. At the back sat an old wooden chair, its legs sunk slightly into the dirt as if it had been there a long time. And carved into the stone wall behind it, rows of tally marks, hundreds of them. Daniel's throat went dry. He pulled back fast, heart pounding. He told himself it was probably nothing. Maybe some past owner had used it for storage. The marks could have been made by kids messing around. But the air smelled wrong, sour, metallic, with a faint hint of rot. He shut the panel, shoved boxes in front of it, and tried to forget. Over the next few nights, sleep became difficult. Daniel swore he heard noises from the basement. Soft scuffs, the faint scrape of wood against concrete. Once, a sharp tap, 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 like Nengels drumming on the underside of the stairs. He stopped going down altogether. One night, after working late, Daniel came home to find the basement light on. He froze in the kitchen, staring at the glow spilling up the stairwell. He hadn't been down there in days. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a notification from the motion sensor he had set up casually when he moved in. Activity detected, basement. Heart racing, he grabbed a hammer from the counter and crept toward the stairs. The tapping started again. Slow, measured, coming from behind the wall under the steps. He leaned close, barely breathing. Tap. Pause. Tap. And then, faintly, a whisper, so soft he thought he imagined it. One more. Daniel stumbled back, bolted upstairs, and locked himself in his bedroom. He didn't sleep. The next morning, he called a contractor and told him to seal the panel permanently, concrete, drywall, whatever it took. When the contractor pried it open, Daniel refused to go near. But the man called up after a few minutes, his voice uneasy. "There's something else down here." He pulled out a small tin lunchbox, rusted and dented. Inside were scraps of yellowed paper, each with numbers written on them. Just strings of numbers, neat and endless, like someone had been keeping count. The contractor asked if Daniel wanted to keep it. He shook his head violently. "Throw it away." Daniel still lives in the house, but he never goes into the basement alone. He had the wall under the stairs bricked up, the seam plastered smooth. He says sometimes, late at night, he dreams of sitting in that chair, scratching tallies into the wall, whispering numbers to himself. And when he wakes, the sound of tapping lingers, echoing faintly from underneath the stairs. Before you go, would you have opened that panel or left it sealed? Share your answer in the comments. Your story might be featured in a future video. If chilling horror is your thing, hit subscribe and ring the bell. I post new stories every single day.
The second story comes from a college student renting a basement apartment who began hearing a low hum at night. And what he discovered explains why he'll never live below ground again. If stories like this make you uneasy, hit subscribe and ring the bell. I post new horror stories every single day. This account comes from Tyler, a 22-year-old engineering student at a college in upstate New York. To save money, he rented a basement unit in a large, old house that had been converted into student apartments. The place wasn't ideal. The ceiling was low, the single window sat at ground level and mostly showed dirt and weeds, and the whole space smelled faintly of damp stone. But the rent was cheap, and Tyler told himself he wouldn't be home much anyway. He set up his desk against the wall, strung Christmas lights for warmth, and joked to friends that it was more crypt than apartment. But within a week, he noticed something strange. At night, after midnight, when the house above went quiet, he'd hear it, a faint, low hum. It wasn't the fridge or the heater. This was deeper, mechanical, steady, vibrating faintly through the floor. He pressed his ear to the wall. The hum seemed to come from the concrete itself. At first, Tyler rationalized it. Old buildings made noises, maybe a water pump, maybe distant traffic echoing underground. But the hum returned every night, always around 12:30, always lasting exactly 47 minutes. And every night, it grew a little louder. The first escalation happened during a late-night study session. He was bent over his laptop, half asleep, when the hum began. This time, his desk lamp flickered in rhythm with it, buzzing softly, dimming and brightening in time with the sound. Tyler leaned back, unsettled. The hum wasn't just sound, it was vibration. He could feel it in his chest, like standing too close to a speaker. The next night, the hum woke him from sleep. His water glass on the nightstand trembled, sending ripples across the surface. He whispered to himself, "This is just pipes, has to be." But in the silence between breaths, he thought he heard something else layered in, a faint murmur, like voices hidden within the vibration. 2 weeks in, he decided to record it. He left his phone on the floor overnight, voice memo running. In the morning, he played it back. The hum was there, low and steady. But as he listened closer, chills swept his body. There were words. Not clear, but there, rising and falling like chanting, embedded in the drone. He thought he heard his name. Tyler tried confronting the landlord. The man looked annoyed. "It's an old building. You're under the boiler room. What do you expect?" But Tyler had already checked. The boiler was 2 floors above, in the attic, nowhere near the basement concrete. That night, unable to sleep, he pressed his ear to the cold floor. The hum was stronger than ever. And then, just once, he felt it. A knock from beneath the concrete. Sleep-deprived and terrified, Tyler stopped staying there at night. He'd crash on friends' couches, make excuses, even nap in the library. But eventually, he had to go back for clothes, for books, for rent he couldn't afford to waste. The last night he spent there, he tried to ignore the hum by blasting music through headphones. But at 12:30, the vibration shook through his mattress. His lamp rattled. His books shifted. His phone buzzed against the desk. He yanked the headphones off and froze. The hum had stopped. For the first time in weeks, silence filled the basement. And then, slowly, a new sound began. Knocking. 4 knocks, evenly spaced, echoing up through the floor as if someone was trapped beneath. Tyler bolted upstairs, locked himself in the bathroom, and waited until morning. He moved out the next day, leaving half his belongings behind. The landlord didn't even argue, just shrugged and said, "Basement units don't work for everyone." Tyler lives in a high-rise now, 5th floor. He says the hum followed him into his dreams. Some nights he wakes at exactly 12:30, chest vibrating, water glass trembling on the nightstand. He won't set foot in a basement anymore because he says the hum was never machinery. It was a signal, and someone, somewhere, answered it. Before you go, have you ever heard noises in your house you couldn't explain? If unsettling horror like this gets under your skin, hit subscribe and ring the bell. I post new horror stories every single day.
The third story comes from a family who discovered an old chest freezer left behind by the previous owners. And what they found inside explains why it had been sealed shut for years. If stories like this disturb you, hit subscribe and ring the bell. I post new stories every day to feed your need for the unexplained. This account comes from a woman named Claire, who moved with her husband and 2 kids into a house outside Toledo, Ohio. The place was a fixer-upper, peeling paint, leaky gutters, a yard full of weeds, but it was big, and they got it for a price they couldn't pass up. The basement was the worst part. Low ceiling, bare concrete, 1 naked bulb that swung slightly whenever the furnace kicked on. It smelled of rust and mildew, the kind of damp that clung to your clothes. Tucked against the far wall sat an old chest freezer, beige enamel, rounded corners, the kind built in the 1970s. It was locked with a heavy padlock. The realtor told them it was just junk left behind. "Previous owners didn't want it," she said with a shrug. "You can toss it." But when Claire's husband tried to drag it out, it barely budged. Whatever was inside made it heavy. At first, they ignored it, moved boxes around it, stored tools on top. But the kids, ages 6 and 9, hated going near it. "It hums," the younger one whispered. Claire laughed it off until she heard it too. At night, lying in bed, she swore she heard a faint, low vibration beneath the floorboards. Not constant, just a few minutes at a time, like the freezer still had power. but the plug wasn't even in the outlet. Weeks passed. Claire's husband decided to deal with it once and for all. He bought bolt cutters, marched down the stairs, and snapped the padlock. The lid creaked as it opened, releasing a burst of cold air that smelled faintly of ammonia and metal. Inside, at first, was nothing unusual. Just stacks of folded blankets, stiff with age, and some cardboard pieces warped by moisture. But beneath the blankets lay jars. Dozens of them. Glass jars, sealed tight, their lids rusted, labels smeared. Inside each was liquid, pale and cloudy, with something small floating in it. Claire's stomach turned. She picked one up with shaking hands. The jar was filled with water and a handful of children's marbles. Another had teeth, tiny, too small for an adult. Her husband muttered, "What the hell is this?" At the bottom of the freezer, beneath the jars, they found a stack of notebooks, pages crumbling, ink smeared from damp. What they could read chilled them. Rows of dates, lists of names, and words written over and over. Kept safe, kept cold, kept forever. They resealed the freezer, shoved it back against the wall, and didn't touch it again. But things in the basement changed after that. Tools went missing, only to turn up inside the freezer when they dared to look. Once, Claire's daughter's doll disappeared. Days later, it was sitting right on top of the lid. The hum grew louder, more frequent. The bulb in the ceiling began flickering whenever they passed. The breaking point came one night when Claire went downstairs to get laundry. The lid was open. The jars were gone. And etched into the dust on the lid was written by a fingertip. A single sentence. "Not yours to take." The family moved out within a year. They didn't take the freezer with them. Claire says she sometimes dreams of opening it again, only to find her own belongings inside. Her keys, her shoes, even her wedding ring. And in the dream, the lid always closes before she can pull them back out. Before you go, would you have opened that freezer or left it sealed? If unsettling horror stories like this keep you hooked, hit subscribe and ring the bell. I post new stories every single day.
The fourth story comes from a homeowner who noticed a faint glow seeping from the drain in his basement floor. And what he saw explains why he never set foot down there again. If stories like this make you uneasy, hit subscribe and ring the bell. I post new horror stories every single day. This account comes from Paul, a 41-year-old school teacher who bought a modest ranch house in rural Pennsylvania. It was quiet, affordable, and perfect for him and his dog. The basement was unfinished, just cinder block walls, a concrete floor, and a single drain in the center to catch any water leaks. Paul didn't spend much time down there, just laundry and storage, but he kept it clean and dry. One night in late fall, while putting laundry into the dryer, he noticed something strange. The drain was glowing. At first, he thought it was a trick of the light, but when he bent closer, there it was, a faint bluish-white shimmer, pulsing gently like the glow of a firefly under glass. Paul frowned, crouched down, and ran his hand along the floor. The concrete was cool, normal. He leaned close to peer inside. The glow seemed to come from beneath, far below the drain pipe, as if another space existed under his basement. He tried to brush it off. Old houses had quirks.
Maybe it was mineral reflection or groundwater catching light from outside. But every night, around the same time, the glow returned. Always faint, always pulsing. And sometimes he swore he heard something with it. A hum. Not mechanical, not like pipes, something softer, almost melodic. One weekend, curiosity won. Paul grabbed a flashlight, unscrewed the drain cover, and lowered the beam. What he saw made his breath catch. The pipe was far deeper than it should have been, dropping straight down like a vertical shaft. The concrete around it looked newer, patched, as though it had been reinforced. And way down, the glow pulsed steadily. For just a second, Paul thought he saw movement in it, shapes shifting, like figures pacing in light. His dog whimpered and backed up the stairs. Paul sealed the drain back up and told himself it was groundwater reflecting minerals. But he didn't believe it. Over the next weeks, the glow grew stronger. It spilled faintly across the floor at night, enough that Paul could see it from the top of the basement stairs. The hum deepened too, more layered, like multiple voices humming together in harmony. One weekend, unable to resist, he went down barefoot. He crouched beside the drain, leaned close, and froze. Because this time, a voice whispered up through the pipe. "Come down." Paul stumbled back, heart hammering, staring at the drain. The glow pulsed once, twice, then went dark. The basement fell silent. The next morning, he called a plumber. The man arrived, removed the cover, and shone his own flashlight inside. After a long pause, he looked up at Paul with a strange expression. "How deep's this house's foundation?" he asked. Paul shook his head. 8 feet, maybe?" The plumber nodded slowly. "This shaft goes down at least 30. Never seen anything like it." He packed up his tools and left without fixing a thing. Paul had the drain sealed with cement a week later. But he swears, sometimes, late at night, he still hears it, faint humming beneath the floor. And once, when he walked into the basement without turning on the light, he caught it. A faint glow seeping through the cracks in the new cement. Paul keeps his laundry upstairs now. He avoids the basement completely. When asked why he doesn't move, he shakes his head and says, "It's not about the house, it's what's underneath it." And sometimes he dreams of standing at the top of that shaft, staring down into the light. And in the dream, the voices are louder, calling his name. Let me ask you, would you have sealed the drain or left it alone? If chilling horror like this keeps you hooked, hit subscribe and ring the bell. I post daily. Until then, watch the floors beneath your feet. Some lights don't come from anywhere safe. Sweet dreams.